Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in just a moment. We are so glad that you joined us for today's celebration. My name is Becky Robinson, and I'm your host for today. And it is so amazing to see all of your smiling faces, to know that you have supported this exciting journey for Sean with the publication of his book today. If you have it, go ahead and hold it up to the screen. Look at this beautiful book. So congratulations, Sean. As we're getting started, I have a few housekeeping items for us today. One of the things is we were really looking forward to having Doug Beal, who was the coach of the 1984 Olympic gold winning team. Unfortunately, he was not able to attend. He happens to be overseas at the moment, but in his place, we have the amazing Bill Neville from The Ohio State University, where he played volleyball. So thank you to Bill for stepping in for Doug Beal. And we'll be hearing a little bit more from him later on. So I do want to request that you keep your microphones on mute until we call on you today to maintain the sound quality of today's event. And a little later in the event, we will give you a chance to talk with Sean, to offer your congratulations and maybe to ask a question if you have one. And at that time, we're going to use the hand raise function in Zoom. So what I'd like you to do is to take a moment to look at the reaction button in the bottom of your Zoom panel and try out that hand raise function so that you're sure that when it's time for you to use it, that you'll be able to find it. And then there are also all of these amazing, wonderful emojis in Zoom. And you can share your feelings by using those emojis throughout the event as well. We are recording today's event, so in the event that you would like to share it later, that might be a possibility for you. So before we get too far, we would love to know a little bit more about why you are here with us today. And, there could be a whole lot of reasons. Maybe you're a huge volleyball fan and you really want to hear from the coaches and Sean. Maybe you are what we call a super fan of Sean. You're a client of his or a colleague or his mom or his kid or his spouse. Maybe you remember the 1984 Olympic team and you're interested to learn more about it. Or possibly you watched that 1984 gold medal winning match and you don't have to tell us how old you were. I will own I was 13 in 1984. Or potentially you are interested in the leadership lessons from the book. And if that's you, you can let us know. So just take a moment, let us know why you're here. And if your microphone is not muted, if you could take a quick moment to go ahead and mute your microphone so that we have great sound quality on the call, that would be super helpful. All right, so let's take a look. Sean told me he didn't love this, but it's true. Most of you are here because you are super fans of Sean Murray, as I am as well. So thank you for taking the time to let us know about your participation. We do have one more poll for you, and we would love to know, actually, for you to tell us in the chat, what does going for the gold mean to you? If you could post your thoughts about going for the gold into the chat, we would love, love, love to see that. If you have any thoughts about going for the gold, and we will share those later. So at this point, what we want to do is to give some of you who may have not had a chance to read Sean's book yet an overview of what the book is about. And for those of you who may not know Sean, he is the founder and president of Real Time Performance, which is a leadership training and organizational development firm based in Seattle, Washington. He's also the host of a weekly podcast called The Good Life, and he writes regularly on his blog, Real Time Performance, and publishes an amazing bi-weekly newsletter called Murray on Leadership. So Sean, I can't wait to hear this overview of the book.
Great, Becky. Thank you for the introduction, and just happy to be here, happy to celebrate with everyone today, this milestone. Really excited about this book and getting the story out. And since the book really just released today, and many of you, I'm guessing don't have it in your hands yet and haven't read it, haven't had a chance to read it, I thought it would be nice to just give you a brief overview of the story of this team and what it means to me and kind of my connection to it. So without giving away too much, on the evening of August 11th, 1984, the last day of the Los Angeles Olympics, the U.S. men took on Brazil for the gold medal. This was a significant moment for USA volleyball because the U.S. men had never before medaled at an Olympics. In fact, they had never medaled at a major international tournament ever. In the pregame meeting, the team captain, Chris Marlowe, gave a rousing speech that culminated with the phrase, "If gold is our destiny, so be it." Now, what brought the team to this moment? To understand, we have to go back a few years earlier. In the early 1980s, a golden generation of talent emerged on the USA national team, but there was a problem. Although the team was stacked with talented individuals, they weren't yet playing together as a team in a way that maximized their potential. The coaches figured something had to change. In order to build teamwork and cohesion, the players and coaches together enrolled in a 3-week winter outward bound course, hiking and snowshoeing through the Abajo Mountains and canyoneering in Canyonlands National Park. They carried 70-pound packs, climbed up to and above 11,000 feet, and hiked over 100 miles. Many of the players did not want to go. I'm sure we'll hear from Aldis later on some of his thoughts on this trip. In the wilderness, teamwork was essential for survival, and everyone had a role to play. During the day, they took turns breaking trail for each other. Every evening, one player set up the tents, while another player collected firewood and a third player prepared dinner. And although the players resisted going on outward bound, by the end, some of the players begrudgingly began to see the value of the experience. And as one player told me, it was something we all laughed and joked and teased about in the months and years that followed. The coaches and team psychologists believed it created a foundation of much needed trust. When the players returned from outward bound, they developed through trial and error an innovative new approach to volleyball that came to be known as the American system. It allowed the creativity of the players to flourish and the team began to win. That, by the way, is Aldis Berzins, and he had an integral role in the American system, which we're going to talk to him about. It was a very creative approach to volleyball. Getting back to the journey of the team, the team learned a number of lessons along the way, on the way of becoming the best in the world. They learned everyone has a role to play, no matter big or small. They learned how to stay calm under pressure and believe in each other, especially when teammates made mistakes and things didn't go their way. They learned how to listen to each other's crazy ideas. They learned to place the success of the team above themselves. And on the evening of August 11th, 1984, as a team took the court that evening for the gold medal match, to beat Brazil, each player knew one thing: they had to play as a team. If volleyball truly is the ultimate team sport, and many of the players believed it was, then to win the ultimate prize would demand a team performance like no other. And that's what this book is about, the journey of this team, Becky.
Thank you so much for sharing that background and letting everyone know what they have when they dive into the book, potentially on as a summer read. I'm so excited now for us to welcome our special guests. We have Bill Neville and we have Aldis, whose last name is not here in my notes, and hopefully when I see it on the screen, I'll be able to say it. Just so I want to quickly introduce them. So prior to Aldis joining the 1984 team, he was a star outside hitter on the Ohio State volleyball team from 1975 to 1978, where he led the Buckeyes to 4 straight Midwestern Intercollegiate Volleyball Association championships and 4 appearances in the NCAA Final Four. After his volleyball career, Aldis served as the assistant coach to the U.S. women's national team and as senior director of the sports development and coaching education for the Special Olympics. Currently, he is the head volleyball coach for Stevenson University. And let's talk about Bill Neville. So during Bill's storied career, he served as the assistant coach alongside Doug Beal for the 1984 team. He also served as the men's national team head coach, the head coach of women's volleyball at Montana State and the University of Washington, and the national director of coaching education for USA Volleyball. And he is an author himself, an author of the book Coaching Volleyball Successfully. And for many years, he ran and operated a volleyball training center. So welcome to both of you. And before we dive into some Q&A with Bill and Aldous, Sean, I'm hoping that you could share with us first the full story of why you wrote the book.
Well, it started 5 years ago. I received a gift from my wife, which was a book called Boys in the Boat. Many of you may have read it. And by the way, everyone was telling me, you got to read this book. And at the time, and the reason I mentioned that is now that I'm trying to market this book, I found out that the reason people read books is because people tell them, this is a great book, you got to read this book. So I'm asking everyone, if you're inspired by this book, if you like the book, tell other people about the book. But that was the case with this book. It's actually about the 1936 University of Washington men's crew team, which against all odds went to represent the United States at the 1936 Olympics in Berlin and remarkably won a gold medal. And I just was so inspired by this team, what I learned about being part of a winning team, building a winning culture, what the coach did to kind of create the conditions for success. And I teach leadership for a living. That's what I do. I help clients develop and grow the next generation of leaders and build high performing cultures. And so naturally I was interested in how to teach leadership. And I thought, I'd like to write a book. I'd like to write a book about a real team, maybe a gold medal winning team, and really study, what they did to become the best in the world. And it was really important that it was a real story, that was a true story, because I believe that, stories are just a powerful way to learn. And if you want to teach something, you want people to remember it, tell a story, because human memory is story based, and stories give us some kind of emotional hook, and when we can hook to that emotion, that's what prompts us to remember things. So we can memorize the state capitals, but that's not going to stay with us very long. So I wanted a story, and I wanted it to be about a team, and the U.S. men's hockey team, the Miracle on Ice, that's already been well trodden. And I thought, there's a lot of great teams out there, men and women's, that have won gold medals. And it occurred to me, my father was the team psychologist of the 1984 men's Olympic volleyball team. And I had a connection to that team. And I was 13 years old. I was at the Los Angeles Olympics. I watched this team. By the way, the Los Angeles Olympics were by far the best Olympics ever, according to me, in my mind. I'm really excited that the Olympics are coming back to Los Angeles in 2028. I hope there's a resurgence of interest in this team, that this book can play a role in that. You all can play a role in that by just reading the book and telling people about it. But at that Olympics, I watched this team. I was inspired by the team. But as I sat down to write the book, or when I thought about maybe writing about this team, I only knew two things. One, spoiler alert, they won a gold medal. And two, that they had been on this outward bound experience. And I thought, there's probably a story there somewhere. And sure enough, so I was put in touch with Doug Beal, who I knew through my father. And Doug, fortunately, had just finished up his stint as the USA executive director of USA Volleyball. So he had a little more time. He was very gracious, sat for some interviews. I started to get his story. He connected me to Bill, who I'd met before. Bill Neville happens to live 20 miles north of me. I live in Seattle and Bill's in Edmonds. And so we went and had lunch. And then between the two of them, they connected me to a number of the players. I ended up interviewing just about all the players. But as I started to learn the story, I was just blown away by what this team did to get to the Olympics. Well, they were in the Olympics because they were the home country, but to go from being a perennial sort of underachieving team to being the best in the world, and the obstacles they had to overcome, the sacrifices they had to make, the challenges between trying to get a cohesive group together, taking these individuals, turning them into a team, the outward bound experience, how the players didn't want to go, how it just one thing after another, the emotional journey of some of the players that didn't make the team, that thought they were going to make the team. There is just so much emotion and drama in the story, I would come back from an interview and tell my wife, I was like, you're not going to believe how this story is getting more, incredible every time I talk to a player. I'm talking to Chris Marlowe about his experience of, getting, he eventually, I guess I won't give away what happens to Chris, but it's really interesting what happens to Chris on his journey. Rod Wild's journey, Mike Blanchard's journey. There's Steve Timmons. I could go on, but that truly inspired me. I really hope that the lessons that readers that read the book take away, some of the lessons that I hope I got across as far as, how to build a winning team and a winning culture. It's something that we can all do, whether we play sports or we're in business or anything in our life.
So Sean, I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about that. At the top of the hour, I read your bio, and of course, your whole career has been around leadership development and organizational development. So what lessons about leadership and team building will readers take away from the story of this team? And do you still have that photo of yourself? I thought we were going to pull that in.
Yeah. Let me see if I can. That's right. So that's a picture of me at just before the Olympics, actually in Pullman. That's Mark Miller. He wasn't a player on the team. He was a team captain, or a team manager. I didn't have a picture with me with one of the players that quite was like this. I had a few, but this anyway. That gives you an idea. And yes, I really was that small. And yes, Mark really was that tall. I didn't Photoshop that. That's really the situation back then in 1984. So briefly, I hit on a few. Let me see if I can stop sharing here for a second. Is that off? Okay. Talent versus commitment is one of the things that really stood out for me about this team. There were a lot of talented players at the time, but what Doug Beal, the head coach, and Bill Neville demanded a certain commitment, and not every player wanted to make that commitment. Some players turned down hundreds of thousands of dollars to play in Europe to be an amateur. There's a whole story about amateur athletics at that time. That's really not the case today. And the players made huge commitments. Doug Beal demanded that the players not play on the beach. That was something a lot of the players wanted to do. And so it took a certain commitment. Not everyone could do that. The risks that the team took and that Doug Beal took and Bill, as far as creating something new, this American system, they had to. In the book, Doug says we weren't afraid to look foolish. And I think if you want to be great, if you want excellence, you're going to have to do something and take a risk. And so there's a whole backstory there around that. You can't copy your way to greatness. A lot of teams wanted to follow the Russian system because they had won several gold medals before '84. The Japanese had won medals and told everyone how they did it. And Bill was sort of amazed that they told him, and he asked him why. And he said, well, only the Japanese can play like the Japanese. And Bill realized that if the American team was going to win, they had to figure out how to take advantage of the unique talents that they had. So those are just a few. There's more. I just the tip of the iceberg. So I wanted to, if I could, Becky, bring in Bill and Aldous a little bit and get their perspective. And Bill, I thought I'd start with you. Thank you, by the way, for being here. Really honored that you're here on this day. I wanted to start with, what do you think the key ingredients of putting together this winning team? Why this team is so successful?
Well, there's a lot of elements. I had a discussion years ago, with coaches about what makes a winning team. And, there's a lot of components. One is luck, but, it starts you got to have talent, and we had talent. There's no question about that. And you can't make that up. You gotta have it. And we had it. And we had the ability to recognize it. We had to be healthy. We had to, you got to have those combinations. And we had Doug and I, a lot of people thought, how do those two guys get along? Because we came from opposite backgrounds. And Doug's one of my absolute, to this day, is one of my great friends. And one of the things that he and I had uh, we had absolute trust in each other. And I mean, we argued nonstop. But there was a deep and abiding trust that we'd never cross a line, certain lines, but we could argue, but we'd trust that we'd come together. We had a common goal, and so did the team had a common goal. We could trust each other. We could trust the team. The thing I had some crazy ideas over time. Aldous might attest to that. But we could try almost anything with these guys, and we could trust them that they would try anything to win. And so we could do some pretty absurd things and try them. And as a result, we came up with a great system that became the American kind of system. And so the team had a common goal, the coaches had a common goal. It was not a friendship group. And a lot of people said, boy, it must be really a great friendship group. It really wasn't, but there was tremendous trust and loyalty to each other. And so it was compatible in an odd sort of a way. And I always to this day, I have a great special feeling for all the guys on that team, even though they're all different, for sure. I mean, it's special. It's hard to even describe sometimes, but I see Aldous there, and I mean, there's not a guy on earth I think can make me laugh harder than Aldous, and he could also make me fairly angry, and I'm sure I made him angry a couple of times, but
Well, let's get Aldous involved in the conversation here. Aldous, thank you, Bill. Aldous, I wanted to ask you. You had a pretty unique journey on this team because you spent the first, I'm not sure exactly, 5-6 years maybe, on the second team. You were on the bench. You didn't see a lot of playing. You were there during the lowly Dayton years of the national team, and then it moved to San Diego. You were from the East. A lot of the players were from California. So what was it like? And then maybe you could tell a little bit about what happened after that, because you ended up playing a very, very important role on the court at the Olympics.
First, Sean, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to represent, one of the 12 players. We all have great stories to tell. And as you mentioned, I was there from the beginning, in the Dayton days when we weren't that good. And then, when we got on the podium at the end. So it was just a real interesting time. And I'd like to thank, say hi to him in front of everyone. And before I get into what you asked me, I wanted to say also that the book, Sean, is just absolutely brilliant. I think, even though it's a story about, something I was part of, but I think it is more than just a volleyball story, and anybody that will buy the book will learn from it. It's got just great lessons in life for any coaches out there. Get it for your players and your parents to read. And I also said earlier, it would make a great volleyball movie. I know everybody, all 86 people on this call, would love to have a good volleyball movie. There isn't one like Bull Durham, and I can see it being the Chris Marlowe story from Cut to Captain. But anyway, my story, I rode the pine for like 6 years. So any coaches out there that have players that complain about not starting, you can tell them about me, how I just basically, you can tell your players that if they're not starting, they still have to actually really believe in themselves. That's what I did. I believed that I should be out on the court. I stayed with that for 6 years, and I only started the last 2, but it just was like icing on the cake. But I always believed that I was as good as anybody. And every spring, new college guys would come in and they'd start ahead of me, and until the very end. But that, and you got to love practice, because 90% of the time, we were going through Neville's drills. And I just loved them. I mean, they were always competitive, and so and I got better because I was always playing against the first unit. In particular, my serve reception, I was just passing the ball, the best serves. And I think the last thing that you need, to stick through if you're not playing, is, I like this word, perseverance. I think I learned that in Outward Bound too. that, you know, when time, any tournament, I mean, half the teams are losers, right? So you got to not quit and just love to get back in the gym and play again. And then, you know, I was ready. I was ready to start when I was called upon by, you know, Neville, and he wrote me into the starting lineup.
Yeah, you mentioned that you got better at passing, and passing is when you, for those that maybe aren't as familiar with volleyball, is when you accept the serve and pass it to the setter. And it just so people in the audience know, in the American system that I kind of talked about, this creative approach that required a lot of trust between Bill and Doug Beal and the players to develop. They went from having 3 or 4 players pass or receive the serve to just 2. And it was the same 2 players every time. And that had never been tried before in volleyball. Some teams had tried maybe with 2 passers, but never the same 2, and had not been tried recently. And the 2 players were Karch, Karai, and Aldis Berzins. And so Aldis ended up being integral to the success of the team, because he was he went from being sort of on the bench to being an important part of this system. Now, it also required some players to spend less time on the court, and that's part of team. And I talked to those players as well. And, you know, they had to realize, I think it was Mark Waldy, I don't know if Mark's on the call, but Mark said, you know, he realized that it was less time for him on the court, but it was better for the team. And that's the kind of sacrifice that putting the team above the individual that eventually led to the success of this team, which I think is such an important lesson for anyone that's on a team. And it required that trust. And I want to go back to you, Bill, for a second, because there was another story in the book about Steve Timmons. I wish I could have wrote more about Steve. I don't know if Steve's on the call either, but Steve has an amazing story. And Bill, you had a special relationship with he went from being sort of not a starter, not really a huge contributor, to being MVP at the Olympics. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with Steve and how that developed?
There you go. Yeah, well, first let me say something about Aldis. You know, there's something I want to say to him, and I just reviewed some of the statistics that I have over, but to this, as far as I know, to this day, Aldis is still the greatest in history of volleyball as a serve receiver statistically. There's nobody ever been better, ever, in the world. It's just kind of impressive. And it took us how many years to figure that one out. But serve receiving and also in defense. I mean, he was the greatest ever. And when you have that on your team, it's pretty good advantage. Steve Timmons, yeah, I had a great instinct about Steve, and he worked really hard at being cool among it. He was one of the younger guys in a group of guys that grew up in Southern California. And he worked hard at being part of that group, in a social group. And, you know, so he worked hard at his cool, I guess is just a better way of saying it. And I would pull him aside, and he, and I'd pull him aside. I said, what's important to you, making this team or being cool? I mean, that sounds trite, but, and I'd said, now if it's being cool, yeah, you're doing pretty good. You know, I think you might make it. But if you want to make this team, there's a coaching staff who makes the decisions on who's on this team that you have to impress. So, you know, let's make a pact and figure that one out. And I said, I think you've got me convinced, I think. But the other 2 guys, Tony Crabb and Doug, they're not as convinced. And he would listen, and privately. And so he and I kind of worked back and forth, and I'd kind of needle him a little bit, and I'd put him, we'd have these at the end of every practice, we'd have a coach on one session, and 3 guys would always be selected. And so I had, when it was my turn, Doug and I would alternate taking them, and I always had Aldis as one of them, which always made him irritated. But part of it was just because I always enjoyed watching Aldis play defense. Aldis always would complain, but I think he hopefully liked it because he was great at it. And then I would select Timmons, who was not as good. And I just work him and work him. And it was an opportunity for him to show what he was willing to do. And over time, he would prove it. And we sent him on a trip with the collegiate team one time when the big team went to Cuba. And I called every day when he was up in Canada with the collegiate team to see how he was doing, because I was afraid that he would go, oh yeah, well, I'm not going to make this team. And yet he proved up. He was a leader. He did all kinds of things that I just believed that he would do. And he did, and he proved up. And I mean, he just blossomed when he had the opportunity, and he had character. He had a deep sense of character. I love the guy. And he's now an assistant coach down in San Diego, and he's a great coach. He really is, with kids. And yeah, he's a special guy. I have a special feeling for that kid. And it was fun to see him blossom. And he's a pretty charming guy. You just have these special connections with all these guys. And I had it not just with Steve, but he was special, and I had a good connection with him. But I have that same feeling with Burrs and all these guys, on different levels.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Your comment about trust and character, that was just a little snippet of the many stories in this book, that the weaving in and out of the players and how they worked with the coaches and worked together. I know Becky, we got to move on. I just want one more question to Aldis if we can. I wanted to go back to Aldis and just ask you about, since we mentioned the Outward Bound, it was one of many different interventions that this team experienced as part of its training. It ended up being memorable to me as a child when I heard that you guys went on this thing. And then when I talked to the players later, I found out that it was just 3 weeks is a long time to be out in the wilderness. And I even talked to some of the Outward Bound course instructors, and they said it was maybe even a little longer and harder than they thought it should have been or could have been. So how was it sold? And just any thoughts on that as far as that experience and what you took from it, and what it meant to the team? I think you're on mute.
I think I was the only guy of the 12 that actually wanted to go on Outward Bound, because I was unique in being from the East Coast and a Boy Scout instead of a beach boy like the other guys that, wanted to stay in Malibu or whatever. But I love camping to this day. And I knew it was going to be 3 weeks, they told us. So this wasn't your typical team building exercise that many in the audience might be aware or know about, like, a ropes course where you go for a day with your team and you build trust. It was for 3 weeks, and it wasn't fun. It was in the dead of winter, and you saw the pictures at the start. We're carrying our food and our tents and don't know how to stay warm in the snow. So it made it really exciting because it was near death. I mean, we could have died of hypothermia if it wasn't for the great instructors that, were along to teach us how to stay warm. Just sleeping with your water bottles and making snowballs to, wipe, go to the bathroom with. Anyway, but I really, it taught, it did teach leadership in a way, and the guys stepped up, doing different things. Everybody needed their roles to, to stay warm at night. Somebody had to build the fire, and another guy get the tent going. And I think the number one thing it did, though, was to give us all a common life experience that we were talking about on the bus in Argentina, in Catamarca. We joke about something from Outward Bound. And so it really served its purpose. It kind of pulled guys from really different backgrounds together. And so that was my takeaway from Outward Bound. It's really worthwhile. And any coaches out there, you should do something. You don't have to take your team for 3 weeks, but that was a little extreme. But some kind of thing outside of volleyball, I think, can really help bond a team.
Yeah, when when the team psychologist, so my father was a team sports psychologist that worked with Doug Beal and Bill and the team. And when they sat down to kind of hatch the plan, what they wanted was a shared significant life experience. And that's like, sounds like what you got, and a little bit more than you bargained for. My father's partner, by the way, Chuck Johnson, I don't know if Chuck is here. Shout out to Chuck. He actually went on the Outward Bound and survived too. So anyway, so Becky, I'm going to hand it back to you. I know you've got some things that we want to do here for the last 25 minutes or so.
Sure. So just to give everyone a sneak preview, I have a question I'm going to ask Sean. Then we're going to tell you some ways that you can help get this book to a wider audience. And we have a giveaway. And then it will be your chance to use the hand raise function and either ask a question of Sean or our special guests, or to just offer your congratulations. And I have to tell you, my heart is like tugged. I don't know, Sean, if you're reading the chat, but your aunt and uncle are so proud of you and your brother, and they're talking about how your dad would be proud. And I'm over here like with all the emotions of an author launch day. So you'll get to read all that stuff later, I'm sure. So before we go any further, Sean, could you share with those who have come today about what you most hope this book will accomplish? You know, you mentioned Boys in the Boat, which is a runaway bestseller that tells a sports story. You mentioned, someone mentioned a movie. So what would you most like to see this book do in the world, Sean?
Well, I think this team, the story of this team is just amazing. And I feel honored that I kind of fell upon it, you know, that my father was involved in the team. And it's not one that a lot of people know about. People know the word Karch Kiraly, the name Karch Kiraly. A lot of people do. We didn't talk a lot about Karch. He was a very important part of the team. You know, Steve Timmons, you hear that name. A lot of the other aspects, not a lot of people know about Outward Bound, what they did, how mediocre the program was before this team came along and kind of figured it out. It's hard to go from being a team that doesn't have a winning culture to being a team that has a winning culture. And this team went on to really establish a dynasty. You know, we didn't talk about Marv Dunphy, who took over from Doug Beal and went on to win a gold in '88, and the Triple Crown, which was the World Cup and the World Championships in between the two gold medals. I mean, it just became a dominant team. Not your, you know, this wasn't a one and done situation. And you know, I guess my hope is that America kind of rediscovers this story. There's a Miracle on Ice story that everyone, you know, knows. It you know, 40 years ago was a long time ago for this Olympics, but you know, the Miracle on Ice was even longer, and people still talk about it. When I talk about this book, people say, "Oh, like the Miracle on Ice," you know, that's kind of what they go to, and that's great. But there's some aspects of this team that go beyond, you know, even what I think the Miracle on Ice achieved, because there was no professional volleyball league in the United States at the time. You know, this was a purely amateur team that was going up against professionals in Europe and things like that. So a Soviet team, which was basically professional, you know, and so my hope is people are inspired that, like Aldous said, that volleyball has a team that a history and a team that they can look up to, in America, you know, has a team and a story that we can get back involved in. And the Olympics are coming back to Los Angeles in 2028. I hope if enough people on this call kind of start a little fire today and tell your neighbors and tell your friends, and that we can kind of keep this thing going so that when 2028 rolls around, we can shine a light on this team. One thing about Los Angeles, though, I want to mention, 9 of the 12 players on this team were from Southern California. Aldous wasn't one of them. There were 2 others that weren't from between San Diego and Santa Barbara, but 9 of the 12 were. And so this Olympics was not just a home country Olympics, it was a hometown, it was a home. And I don't think that's ever happened before, that one American team has 75% of the team from a city, and that city was also hosting the Olympics. So it was very special for Los Angeles, very special for a lot of the players on the team. And it's going to be special when the Olympics come back to Los Angeles too.
That's amazing. So a few moments of telling you how you can best help get this book out into the world. As you might know, today is the launch day for If Gold Is Our Destiny. It's such a beautiful book. So if you haven't already, one of the best ways you can help is to buy the book. And we want to ask, if you have not bought the book yet, that you would buy the book right now. And if you do that, we have a special guest. If you buy the book right now, we created 10 of these Gold is My Destiny journals. And at the beginning of the call, we asked you, what does Gold is My Destiny mean to you? Jody said, going for the gold is a manifestation of what Sean's father taught me and many others. Set a goal and stick with it no matter how difficult it is. Congrats, Sean, you achieved one of your life goals.
Yeah.
Jeff says going for the gold is being the best you can be. Thomas said perseverance and human connection. Julie said striving to do the best I possibly can do, and many other comments on a similar theme. But if you want to get one of these journals, we do have a form that we're putting in the chat. And if you buy the book right now, and then you complete the form with your US-based address, we will select 10 winners for this journal and ship these out soon. And if you've already bought the book, this might be a great time to buy it for a friend, especially a friend who enjoys either reading about sports or reading about leadership. So a few other ways that you can help Sean. One would be if you've already read the book or if you read it soon, to leave an Amazon review. Yeah, sorry.
Doug, I just want to say, can I say something before I talk
Oh,
about
sure.
I want to say something about journal and why we want to give away a journal, because when I was writing the book, journaling kept coming up. So when I would go meet with Doug Beal, he would pull out these journals of the time when he was coaching, and I'd ask him a question. Well, what was going on in Argentina at the World Championships when you played Bulgaria and the team was up 12-7, and then they lost. And this was a kind of a tough loss for this team. And he would pull out this journal and he'd say, well, and he'd look in there and he had notes and he knew who started and who went in, and he kept a journal. And then on Outward Bound, they gave the players journals. And during the solo experience, they went off and they journaled. Chris Marlowe happened to keep his journal, and it came back again. He brought it out. During that speech, I talked about the night of the gold medal match. And I've gotten a lot of value out of journaling. It's just, I think to achieve greatness, if you want to go for the gold, if you want to do something incredible, grow as a person, you got to have some introspection. You got to have reflection. You got to think about where you are, where you want to be. And a lot of times that's writing to yourself. And so I just thought it was great that we took that little aspect of the journal. And now if anyone buys the book today, we want to give you one. You can go for your own gold. And anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
Sure, no problem. So a few other thoughts about ways you can help Sean. If you've already read and enjoyed the book, to leave your review on Amazon. Only a few sentences will help another reader discover that this is a great read for them. You can also review the book if you use Goodreads. That's another site for readers. Here's another idea you may not have thought of. If you're connected to an organization that might be inspired by this story, you could also hire Sean to come and give a keynote speech based on this book. Or you may want to contact Sean to explore how you can create a training program in your organization based on the concepts in the book. Even if you have a virtual book club that you'd like to invite Sean to, or if you are connected to a media outlet, like maybe you have a podcast or a radio show or a TV show, I know that Sean would love to be invited onto those. And then finally, if you have an online presence, either a website or a newsletter or your own social media accounts, we would love to have you share this book to those people who are following you on social media. So those are just a few ideas of ways that you can help support spreading this message with the world. And at the current time, I think, Sean, you can buy this book as a print book or as an ebook. Is that correct?
Yeah, I looked this morning. I didn't see the Kindle ebook available on Amazon yet. And I asked my publisher, they thought it would be available today, the same day as the book. So it may be available later. I don't know. I was hoping to get that information. So just keep checking back. I think it will be very, very soon if it's not today.
And is the audiobook available, Sean?
Yeah, the audiobook is available. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So you can buy the book in all your favorite formats. So this is the exciting time that we are going to invite those of you who are on the call to ask your questions or to speak your congratulations to Sean. I do see that Dwayne has his hand raised, and so I'm going to go ahead and invite you at this point to speak. If you have a camera, we'd love to see your face. If not,
my camera's freaking out a little at the moment. I'll try to fix that, but I just ordered the audio book so I can verify that that's available from Amazon.
Perfect. So
can I say something about the audiobook? Chris Montero did the narration, and he's got a great voice. It's wonderful. And so thank you, Chris. And I think he's here, so I want to do a shout out to Chris.
Dwayne, did you want to ask a question or to share Ah, good, your camera.
I got my camera working at least. No, I think that's good. It was really fun hearing about it. Brings back great memories. I had the pleasure of coaching with Bill for a number of years. I really enjoyed it. And so yeah, thanks everybody and good luck with the book.
Thank you, Dwayne.
All right, Dave, I think you're up next.
Hey, Sean, just knowing your dad so well over the years, what a wonderful trainer he was and great mentor for you. So apple doesn't fall far from the tree, but wondered if you would say a couple of words about your father's role as the team psychologist.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So my father, just, he passed away a year ago. I was just finishing the book. He had read many of the drafts, I always loved to get the updates on the book. He kind of knew it was progressing along, and we talked to Doug Beal about it. And I don't know if he talked to Bill, you about it much, but so my father, and he has a partner that he worked with, Chuck Johnson. They both have PhDs in sort of, I think, actually educational psychology, but they did a lot of work in the world of organization development. And their role on the team was to create the conditions for success and cohesion, building trust. They worked with players individually at times, but also on building the culture. So I think it was very admirable of Doug Beal to get them involved when he did. They actually started working with the team in '74 when Doug Beal was still a player. And Doug then became a coach, but as a player, he liked what they were doing. And I was fortunate that my father kept a lot of notes from the '70s and some of the interventions that he made. And so I have very detailed notes of what players said, what they wrote down on cards. I put a lot of it in the book because I wanted people to see how the gears turn and how you go from a sort of a team of individuals that really isn't playing well together and doesn't have that trust and cohesion yet to get there. And it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of discussion and dialogue. I'll just give you one example of something they did. They actually created a system for the players to give feedback to the coaches. And this was in the 1970s, and they said, okay, players, you're going to write down on the cards some feedback to the coaches. It could be positive, it could be constructive. And they did it in one room, and they had the players write it down. Then they took the cards into another room, sat down with the coaches, and went through card by card what these players were saying. And they'd say things like, we don't need to be coached as much during the game, or we'd like there to be more positive feedback, or, and some of it was not easy for the coaches to hear, but they did. So that's just one example, but there's a lot of them. I don't know if Chuck is here, if he has anything to say. I can't remember if he joined, but anyway, I was very fortunate to have that connection, obviously, to the team. And so there is a little bit of a bent when you read the book. You get to see it from, the theme is really how the team comes together, and that definitely comes out in the book.
He provides a lot of secret sauce to a lot of organizations. I'm sure he did here too. So I have to go to the thing, but thanks, Sean. Best wishes.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Hey, Becky, I think you're on mute.
Oh, so Peter, welcome.
Oh, hey, Peter.
Oh, thanks, Becky. Hey, Sean, how are you?
Good.
I just want to say congratulations. And as I said to you in an email, the Outward Bound program, and for other people on the call, I was the course director and one of the instructors on the Outward Bound course. I think my colleague Jimbo is also on the call. But the course, I think it was transformational for some of the players, hopefully all of them. But for me, as one of the Cobb's staff member, it was also transformational. I mean, it set me off on a new course. So anyway, I want to thank you for writing the book. I'm about 50 pages into it, and it's an inspiring story. So thank you for writing it, and including the piece about the Colorado Bound School.
Yeah, you're welcome. And Peter, I forgot to mention the journaling connection, that you kept a journal during Outward Bound, and then you wrote a trip report, and you had a partner named Randy Udall who passed away about 10 years ago, I think. And Randy kept a journal, and I never got a chance to meet Randy. He seems like an amazing guy, because Randy's perspective, and I got these quotes in the book from Randy, are just gems. I mean, this guy was one of the instructors, and he was observing the team acutely, and he was writing down every night what he was seeing, and then he would put it into this trip report. So when I went to write the chapter on Outward Bound, I had all this incredible material, and it was partly because of you and Randy, and I'm sure Jimbo and Eddie also contributed and everything. But anyway, Randy and you wrote the reports, and so thank you.
No, it was fun to find it. Literally, I think we found it, 8 years ago in the archives of Outward Bound. I was like, oh my God. And I hadn't read it since I wrote it back in, a month or so after the course. So anyway, I'll let others speak, but thanks again. I think we're on another call next week.
Yeah, we're going to do some radio together. Thanks, Peter.
All right.
So I'll call on Jody first, and then after that, Jimbo and Jack. And we are getting close to the end of the hour. So let's try to keep just about 2 to 3 minutes each to make sure that everybody has a chance.
First of all, congratulations, Sean. You're a role model for your family and friends. Huge accomplishment. Congrats. My question to you is, this was a difficult project for you because I followed you through the whole journey. Was there a time when you wanted to just throw in the towel and give up? And if what made you get through it? If you did face that, what helped you get through the process?
I think it was the team, actually. As I was writing the story about this team, they kept having all these obstacles and things weren't going their way. And I thought, if they could persevere and do it, I was trying to write the story to teach to other people to learn these lessons. And I was sort of learning them as I was writing it. And several times the project went dormant for months at a time. And something would gnaw at me to say, you know what, the story needs to get out. Those guys buckled down, did the work, did what it took to win a gold medal. I can do what I can to try to get this project finished. And so they were inspiring to me. I hope they're inspiring the people who read the book. Thanks, Jody.
Am I on, Becky?
You're on, Jimbo.
Hi, Sean.
Hey, Jimbo.
Aldi, Nev, good to see you. I'm Jimbo Buickert. I'm one of the Outward Bound instructors. I just wanted to throw in one other piece here about the Outward Bound course, and Sean kind of alluded some to it with Randy's notes, which is, I think the course was an amazing assessment tool, and Randy was a particularly sharp mind with that. But I think, for Chuck, Sean, Nev, Tony, Doug, it was, there's another whole way to take a look at all the players and see how they reacted under pressure. I know that Nev particularly got a dose of that on the last day of the course when he was abandoned by a certain player, name unknown, during the orienteering marathon. And so it gave us a look into how people would perform under pressure and so forth. And other guys like Aldi and I think Rod, who are happy to be out there camping, most guys showed up like, no, we don't want to be here. So it was a little bit of upward struggle just on that one. And just to see how people responded to that in a time of difficulty, stress, and so forth, really said a lot in itself. So I think that's a whole thing that happens with Outward Bound courses in general. So, and I will say just last thing is that, Randy, who was one of my closest friends, passed away in 2013, but, the course gave us years of days of backpack trips and river trips when we'd reflect on the course and rerun it and so forth and rethink how to do things and so forth. So it certainly spun out in many ways. So thanks, Sean, for the book. I'm about halfway through it. Aldi, Nev, great to see you. And any other players and coaches are on. Thanks.
Great. Thanks for sharing it in the Colorado Outward Bound community. I know Colorado Outward Bound sent a link out to, I don't know, maybe 15,000 people on the newsletter about the book. And I really appreciate that. And I hope people, it's not just a volleyball book. That's what I wanted to emphasize. Thanks.
Welcome, Jack. We'll have to have you unmute, Jack, so we can hear you.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for writing this. The journey is so much a part of the end place. And Aldi, great to see you. Hey, I have a quick question. It might not be so quick, but the transition that the team and the coaches did between the two Brazil matches of pool play and then turning the team around and winning the gold medal and winning it convincingly, I'm really interested in how that dynamic took place.
I might let Aldous or Bill take that one. I tried to capture it in the book, but it's an important part of the story. Bill, I think you're on mute.
I did spotlight you, Bill. If you'd like to share, you can unmute. Can you unmute, Bill?
How about there? Okay, am I on? Okay. Actually, we kind of held back. We didn't use everything we were going to use. And I mean, we always played to win, but we didn't also unveil everything in our hand, if you will, because we knew we were going to play them again. We were disappointed that we couldn't blow them out. We'd like to have put them away early, but on one hand, but on the other hand, we knew that we had them again. So we didn't show everything that we had in the first round, but we were ready for them the second time. Does that make any sense? So, yeah.
I'd say it's sports. You know, when you have like a World Series, you have a bunch of matches or a bunch of games, and it can be your night. And just from a personal bragging perspective, I stuffed Del Zotto, I think, on the first set. That kind of set the tone. Like, hey, but I have to correct Bill on, he called me the best defender or passer. We had Karch Karai on the team. He was a pretty good defender and passer too. But anyway, thanks. Thanks for letting me be part of this again.
So as we come to the end of this very special hour celebrating Sean Murray and this massive milestone and accomplishment of bringing this book, If Gold Is Our Destiny, How a Team of Mavericks Came Together for Olympic Glory to the World. Congratulations, Sean. As we wrap up the hour, we do want to remind you that the book is available today on all your favorite online retailers, and Wendy has put those links in the chat. Sean, I'm hoping that you can send us off with some parting inspiration as we wrap up the hour together.
I just want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting, many of you supporting me personally through this and for supporting this project, and whatever connection you have to this book, to me personally, or to the story, that I just ask your support in spreading the word. I mentioned earlier, everyone was telling me 5 years ago, you got to read this book, Boys in the Boat. And if you love this team, if you love this story, if you're inspired by it, that's what I'd ask you to do. Go out, tell people about it. Hey, have you read If Gold Is Our Destiny? It's a great story about a team that went from being sort of an underachiever to the best in the world and really becoming a dynasty. And you'll love it. So that's my message. I just want to say thanks again. Thanks, Becky, for hosting it. Aldous for being here, representing the players, Bill representing the coaches. Yeah, have a great day, everybody.